Welcome back to My Boys Planet coverage. This was the 9th episode titled Started to Realize, and it looks like we have clearly defined content again. Rather than those odd unknowns mixed in with cold-hearted eliminations. So last week, I had to make two different videos. They were off-the-cuff videos. The first one was just speculation, and the second one was kind of a follow-up after the release of finalized teams. So as a short recap to my latest video rankings and predictions, the perceived lowest team would be Supercharger, the highest voted team would be Say My Name, the best performance would be On Guard, while the worst would be Switch. So pretty much there was a prediction for every team except for Team Over Me, which according to the metrics just sat in the middle at third place. So with that, let's just get into the recap. After a short spoiler preview and crying after eliminations from last week, the show did a brief breakdown on the current state of teams. Now, surprisingly, the number of people required for each team, they actually changed from the first previews of the song, where there was just backup dancers filling those roles, and they were demonstrating the vanilla versions of choreo. And basically, it all comes down to Supercharger and Switch having lost all their members. What they needed was a transplant, while the other teams that had surplus members, they needed to donate some of their stand-ins. Now, by this time, I'm wondering how the teams would be reassigned. And I had guessed in the previous week that understudies who overlapped on roles would be dropped or recruited, and it turns out that, believing the end-of-show previews actually work half of the time, and Nakamden, Zhang Shuaibo, and Haruto would actually have to end up pleading their case to potential volunteers for each team. One thing that was sort of interesting here was that the Team Over Me gave up members based on who the other members liked. So everyone voted for who they liked, and whoever was left over was the ones who were kind of donated away. Whereas teams like Say My Name, they explicitly voted on who to expel. So it must be even worse for like Chawoon Ki, Takatu Oli, and Seowan to have been dismissed based purely on dislikes. Now, Kim Tae-rae and Park Han-bin, they left on their own, though. And, wanting a chance to shine, I feel like that's perfectly respectable. Also, Jong-woo, he was basically let down again by the process. He didn't get to choose... he didn't get his personal song choice again, or the song that he worked really hard on. Anyways, here's a quick preview of the current state of teams. From here on, the show is structured a bit oddly. We get the first part of preparations for each team, followed by another outdoor challenges spot, and that's connected to prizes or perks for a special performance event. And then we get two performances with the usual preps, checks, and upsets. And then all of this is signed off with the cliffhanger ending and vague real-time vote rankings. So with that, let's get into the preps. As the only surviving member of Supercharger, and its new leader, Haruto, became burdened with bringing the new transplants up to speed. And this was a tough song to dance to, and at this stage of the game, the new members felt it was only appropriate that Haruto also take on the killing part. And it was all a bit sudden for him to receive all of these challenges at once. While I understand it was hard, and they'd really only have hours until the interim check, I still felt that the attitude of these guys, it was kind of lame. Like, they were proven to be 3 stars or better, and they're actually losing confidence. Now, I understand it's a hard song, I understand there's no time to learn it, but I still felt like they should have had a better attitude. And of course, Takuto being among them, honestly, Takuto hasn't really failed the stage performance yet. And so, I know that he can make stuff a little bit hard behind the scenes in terms of your learning speed, but I feel like he hasn't let down anyone yet. And then there's Ollie, who I've always liked, but lately I've been criticizing him for maybe being the Glee version of Gangsta. And then you have Chawoon Ki, who has, as far as I know, he's always performed well. And then Wang Zihao and Seowan are also top performers. So these guys really shouldn't be worrying as much as they are. With Team Say My Name, they primed us for some drama with Matthew being upset about role reassignment. Sung Han-bin, he kept his concerns to himself about wanting to swap Matthew and Sung Aeon, but it took prompting from Ji-woong for him to act. Now, previously I mentioned suspecting Kim Ji-woong. He may be a sort of agent for the producers after he showed up and gave Matthew a pep talk. And I think this may be one of those moments with Sung Han Bin, where I kind of have similar thoughts. Now, maybe I'm wrong here, and Jiwoong is just this angelic empath, and he knows the depths of people's specific problems. But either way, I feel like he's a useful sub-leader here. Matthew, upon hearing this, he thinks it's a prank. He remains somewhat difficult. Even so, the other team members remain strongly suggestive, but they don't force him into any changes. And I feel like the other team members, they were actually protecting Matthew because maybe he wasn't up to snuff in practice. And when it comes down to it, Matthew, he's actually one of the rare trainees with X Factor that makes him basically immune to needing airtime to get votes. And it's similar to kind of like Wedding Bae, where he could easily coast as an early fave. And it's really only in over displaying drama that he can negatively affect his own chances. But with that said, I'm not sure Seungyeon has been entirely stable with his main talent as vocals, so I guess we'll see how things play out. In the Switch team, Jongwoo outright rejects the killing part because of the time constraints. I'm not sure if anyone nominated him, but I guess he's been so typically the friend man so far that I guess it was worth avoiding the possibility of the suggestion. Park Han Bin really wanted the killing part, and he actually tried out with practice for the killing part under his belt already. So up until now, I feel like he's really only applied himself to helping others learn and refine choreography, and for that reason I've always called him the angles dictator. But I was glad he got a chance to take on the killing part, which he handily beat out Na Kam Dan on. Of course, this doesn't mean that he would be able to avoid the role of dance instructor for long, because Kim Tae-rae, who up until now could avoid heavy choreo, was now struggling with it, and he was in need of help from the angles dictator. In Team On Guard, only a few understudy parts survived eliminations, including the killing part, so the team decided to do trials again for those roles. The killing part was still desired by Kim Gyuvin and Park Gun-wook, but Lee Seung-wan also wanted a shot. After some demonstrations, Kim Jun-hyung, he kind of wanted the finalists to suffer a bit, so he made them go through a kind of typical stretched out elimination announcement with little success because they just didn't have all the clever metric tracking used by Mnet. Of course, Gunwook got the killing part, and that should have been the end of it if not for the prank by other boys on the young guy to make him feel like Lee Seung-hwan really wanted it. Seung-hwan would get another try, after which he beat Gunwook for the role, and everyone played along with this. It was just a joke. Now honestly, when I saw this, I was also thinking about Kim Jun-hyun's lengthy elimination joke as well. And I just felt like these boys, they just had way too much time on their hands. I mean, it was funny and all, but they definitely weren't in the position that Switch and Supercharger teams were in. In Team Over Me, Zhang Hao was the leader and also the killing part. Zhang Hao expressed, after getting accepted as the leader, that he wanted to highlight every team member, and they all lauded him and applauded him. Now, personally, I expected this team to come in third, based on the voting power and the skill rankings. But seeing how down to business they were, I'm hoping to see a knockout performance here. Jongwoo, he put in a lot of groundwork into this team before being expelled. And now with Zhang Hao taking over, it should be interesting, seeing a level-headed top trainee call the shots. Something interesting was also happening with Lee Jung-hyun, as the show seemed very intent on revealing his secret talents as an all-rounder. And I've never even talked about him on this show, and so it was interesting here. Actually, Zhang Hao's actions and his line of questioning with this prep sequence, it all seemed in line with his original agenda as well. And I felt like he was either playing into the original promise to highlight every member, even off stage now, or the producers may be guiding some of this. I felt like Lee Jung-hyun, he never got coverage before, and now he was suddenly getting a lot of coverage. After the first part of preps, we take a short jump into the future to Performance Day, where some eliminated trainees appear in the audience, and Star Master Key of SHINee is revealed to the live audience. It's at this point that he reveals a video for the audience, which concerns a special performance and another outdoor games day where the prizes affect the perks each group of boys would have during that special performance showcase. It was a nice change from the norm, and there were some funny moments, and the childhood photo matching here went a lot faster than it did during Girls Planet, I think, but they still ran out of time. Why does Takuto basically look the same? And also, why does Ricky look totally different? Continuing with a Guess Who style game, Ji-woon was the one who recognized the older gents unassociated with the show, but most of them just recalled fellow trainees and Star Masters. The last game, for food, involved catching jelly with their mouths, and I just have to wonder why Jay was so good at it. Now, maybe it's just me, but I just feel like, the threshold for success on this particular challenge, it was just kind of unreasonably high. I feel like, as good as Jay did, the mystery guest should have received a better meal. But anyways, once the special performance showcase actually began, they revealed the audience. It turned out to be, predictably, their parents. Now, some of the boys, they were shook for missing their families, while others got visibly nervous about having to perform for them. Now, overall, this was a touching segment, and it ended with the boys being surprised with a twist that the showcase was actually an interim check evaluation. But this twist was turned around again when the feedback notes were revealed to be just positive letters of support from the parents, and the boys cried and everything. So, after that, it was basically just back to prep and performances. Only 2 teams performed this week, and then another was left as the cliffhanger. With Team Supercharger, I felt like they were all well dressed on performance day, and I guess when there's less teams, the budget gets distributed a bit more evenly. Now, at this point, everyone knows this team struggles. Even the Masters are aware of the dilemma with the 3 Q-type boys having trouble pulling off a fiercer, edgy vibe. The boys practiced into the dead of night, doing both vocals and choreography for the first section of dance, so they could have at least something to show to the Masters. In the actual performance, though, the set was amazing, and the team had a strong start at a 7.6, with this sort of kind of interesting intro before the performance. It almost immediately rose to an 8.1 because of Wang Zihao and Cha Won-ki building up the vibe very early on, and then Seo Wan's face expressions were just on point. Ollie, who I've been doubting for weeks now, actually went hard. I didn't think he had the grit hidden under his typical clear, enunciated kind of Glee version of gangsta, but he actually convinced me here. I mean, there was actually almost like a rough kind of he just wasn't as clearly enunciated as he usually was, and I think it helped him. Takuto is still a bit deer in the headlights here, and I noticed that he missed some beats actually, but it wasn't too noticeable. I think because they kind of cut away from the camera, maybe it was more noticeable to the live audience. But I would say he and Cha Won-ki, they could still work a bit on the face expressions. There's this tendency for them to kind of be numb-faced or doe-eyed, but the performance was good, and it kept rising until it landed at 8.7, and I'm rather shocked about that. By the numbers, there's no reason these guys should have performed the worst, but by voting power, there's actually no reason they expect to survive if they put on any less a performance than they did. These guys, they basically grabbed their nuts from deep within and put it all out on the stage, and I'm pretty proud of them. An 8.7 is good on any day of the week. It might be one of the highest scores any team's ever received on this show. So after the performance, Haruto got 852 points for first place, which is super high, maybe the highest so far. And then Takuto got 448, which isn't the lowest I've seen, but to me it seems like a bit low despite what little issues I saw. At this point, I feel like it's kind of rude to point that out to him. Why would you talk about the bottom 6? But maybe it's relevant. Maybe the show's kind of trying to light a fire under him. But I don't think he's really ready. I think he's just young. I don't think he's ready to process that mentally. But anyways, Team On Guard, they were up next, and they also had decent outfits. Now in preps, the boys showed up to practice late, and they were probably thinking that they had it all down, didn't need to practice hard. This probably got to the Master's ear, because Master Choi basically, he reamed them out for being complacent and lazy and not expanding on and maximizing their performance like we talked about earlier. Now honestly, I kind of agreed, seeing as they had so much time to waste and they were playing pranks and whatnot. After this feedback, the boys, some of them wanted to comfort each other, but leader Lee Ho-taek said they should feel scolded and work harder. And they also talked about the people who got eliminated and how they promised them that they would win and survive. After that, they started to change up the routine, and they practiced into the late AMs, 4 a.m. In the actual performance, it started at a 7.2, which is lower than Superchargers actually, but it repeatedly rose, first to a 7.6, then to an 8.2 because of good expressions and vocal. Hey, Lee Ho-taek, he actually suits the song vocally, and I was truly impressed. In the past, I've criticized him for being indulgent, but here it was perfectly excellent. It was amazing, actually. And the rap section was good with both Kim Gyuvin and Hiroto. And I would say there's there were some trivial soft spots in the performance. Like shortness of breath or like slight loosening on some choreo, like maybe when they thought the cameras weren't looking or transitioning. But the energetic parts did keep things high. And although the highest score for this team was an 8.5 for me, and it was tentative, maybe 8.6, I just wasn't sure how it would compare to Superchargers 8.7, who kept the energy high the whole time. But this team, they kind of had more burst energy, and that's probably attributed to Kupjun Hyun. Maybe he had something to do with it, say, in the choreo. And it basically made you walk away being drawn into certain parts or memorizing certain parts of the choreo more. Now, after this performance, Kim Gyuvin, he got first place with a 748, which at this point, I feel like that's just expected from the live audience. I actually think the two Lee's vocals were really elevating the song here, and Park Gun-wook was made for this killing part. The last team is Cliffhangered, and I'm not sure if it's worth covering Say My Name's prep, since, there's just going to be some redemption next week, but so far it's just basically Matthew crying because he wants to perform Sub Vocal 1 with the English lyrics for his mom to hear and understand. Now, I'm not even sure if I buy that reasoning, but I feel like most people could agree that they prefer the happy and easygoing Matthew that we saw in the beginning versus this tragic Matthew that we're seeing now. So after that, there's a temporary ranking, which I'll just ignore because it's incomplete. Based on what I would say so far, Supercharger, they did amazingly well. And Unguard did pretty good with some memorable moments. Based on preliminary scoring, it seems like Unguard may be beating Supercharger by approximately 100 points. Now, even though Haruto scored the highest, Takuto's low could be damaging to the group. It's possible that Hiroto, being last place trainee, top 28, maybe he could cause Unguard to score lower, but I just feel like he's just too stable to be punished by the live audience. So we're not talking about the voting at home audience affecting their ability to win here. But that said, the people voting at home will have a final say in actual eliminations. And Supercharger, they did receive a higher score from me, but maybe I'm seeing an edit of this performance and not the actual performance, so I don't know if I'm missing things. But I feel like they did put on a really good performance, an 8.7 performance, versus Unguard's 8.5. Maybe my performance valuations are correct, and the audience giving Kim Gyuvin a lower score than Haruto is a sign of that, and we'll find out. So I look forward to Say My Name's performance next week. It had a pretty strong start from what I could tell, so I guess that's pretty much it. So, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. I feel like I had a lot more to say this week versus last week, where I was just kind of off the cuff because there was nothing there. And finally, if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.